And for the first roundtable discussion of our 2-hour US election special here on Paris Live PM, I'm joined by a very distinguished panel of guests today. That is Axel Krause to my left here, who's a correspondent for the TransAtlantic magazine and Secretary General of the Anglo-American Press Association here in Paris. Thank you for being with us today. Ardavan Amir-Aslani, who is a Paris-based lawyer specialising in international law and Middle East. And the Middle East, you are a specialist in those regions. Thank you very much as well for coming to the programme. And Curtis Young, Professor of History and Literature at the ESSEC University here and former chair of the Black Caucus at Democrats Abroad here in the French capital. You're all very welcome to the programme. Now, we're going to discuss what we can expect over the next 4 years. Now, in this campaign, there's been a lot of negative press, there's a lot of mudslinging, and Donald Trump has said a lot of very, very controversial things. Now, Axel, I'd just like to go to you first. There's been a lot of reaction coming in over the media today, but none more vitriolic I've seen today was from the New Yorker magazine and an author called David Remnick. Now, in his piece today, in reaction to the Trump victory, he said, "The election of Donald Trump to the presidency is nothing less than a tragedy for the American Republic, a tragedy for the Constitution, and a triumph for the forces at home and abroad of nativism, authoritarianism, misogyny, and racism." Would you agree?
I would not. And for the following reason. I think it's extremely important that we distinguish between what Donald Trump said truthfully and untruthfully about a whole range of issues that we may get into, and what he's actually going to do. The proof of the pudding is in the eating, and I think we've seen actually what may be the third phase or the third Donald Trump, the first having been the Donald Trump that he was in Queens, a businessman from New York, totally unknown, building up his fortune based on the family business. The second phase was New York, Manhattan, building towers, building up his reputation, and being, in effect, a star, which he was on his own television.
Indeed.
We are now in the third phase, which is we now have a Donald Trump, businessman, big man around town with the ladies, and now president-elect. The truth of the matter is, I think, being here in Paris and not in Washington, but I'm not sure being in Washington would make much difference, we don't really know what he's going to do, who he's going to pick to be his really permanent advisors. He introduced several of them when he made his speech, and I listened to his acceptance speech with surprise and with a dose of optimism about him and what he's likely to do.
Well, he has to be more conciliatory, obviously, now that he's actually pipped the post. I mean, he has to be able to unite the country in some way, after such a divisive campaign.
Of course, but the question is, how is he going to square the things that he said, everything from NATO to women and so forth? I'd like to just say a word about Russia. As a former Moscow correspondent and still very close, 4 years in Moscow in the Brezhnev era, I continue to follow things very closely. Look, Mr. Putin is not a Democrat. He's running what has basically been referred to as an authoritarian regime. And one of the main reasons that he's been so pro-Trump is not because he likes the way he carries his hair or the way he talks, but what Hillary Clinton talked about with regard to Putin, and the fact that it now became very clear that the reset policy that Obama tried didn't work. And she was among the few people close to him who said it won't work. So this optimism and what is being said in Moscow is because the media have been just untruthful and totally unbalanced about what this election was about. Well, and I feel there's no credibility at all in Putin's support.
Well, on that point now, I just want to pass the question over to Ardavan. Now, we're looking at Russia. We were talking about Russia. Axel was mentioning Russia. Now, Russia has said that it will do all it can now to restore trade and economic relations with the United States, bury the hatchet after the very icy relations between the Secretary of State Clinton and, of course, Barack Obama himself. But one could say that Trump and Putin have been having this tacit bromance over the period of this campaign. But how could the relationship between Putin and Trump affect what is happening now in Syria and also Iraq? But let's just say Syria for the Russian point of view.
I believe, as it was mentioned, that we are dealing with two different Donald Trumps, the businessman and now the president-elect. I am not a believer in what I've been hearing so far from the international media conveying the image of a jingoistic, xenophobic U.S. president. I heard that same speech of acceptance that he made today, and he sounded pretty conciliatory to me. I believe, however, that the big changes are going to occur in the Middle East because he's going to approach the matter from a very practical point of view, in the sense that it's no longer going to be about ideology, it's going to be about American interests. And at the end of the day, for example, were he to look at the Syrian situation, he's going to look at what the options are on the table, and he's going to see Assad is there. He may not be the greatest Democrat on the planet, but he still is a secular individual. People of different communities and different faiths and different racial backgrounds lived in peace under his authority. And what is being opposed to Assad today is a ramshackle group of extremist, jihadist, fanatical Muslims who are out there to raise havoc. And I'm sure his practical approach will be different from what we've witnessed so far under the Obama administration.
Well, on the point of pragmatism now, Iran's President Hassan Rouhani has said that there was no possibility of the nuclear deal, with world powers being overturned by Donald Trump, despite Trump has threatened to rip the thing up. I mean, will this agreement still stand?
It is virtually impossible for the president-elect to go back in history and disregard that document. There are institutions in America. There are organizations that run the government. There's a State Department, professionals around. The U.S. president-elect cannot just go about tearing treaties and agreements as one may think. And furthermore, this is a document that was signed by the United States in addition to 5 other countries, the 4 other members of the Security Council plus Germany. So the United States cannot go around, totally modifying its previous stance. So that's going to stay. And in any case, we should remember that what is the fundamental issue today between Iran and the USA is no longer the nuclear deal. It is basically the sanctions that are in place and have been in place for the last 4 decades pursuant to the Iran hostage crisis. And these belong to the Congress. And the Congress has not changed its color, because we've noticed so far, that's what I've discovered, that basically speaking, both the House and the Senate are going to be in the Republicans' hands. So that's not going to change.
Now, moving away from the Middle East, let's go back to the home territories. And Curtis Young, I want to ask you, yet again, there's another quote that is coming out, and you, of course, being a scholar of history and literature, there's another quote that's coming out over the internet today that's saying that Trump is vulgarity unbounded, a knowledge-free national leader who will not set markets tumbling but will strike fear into the hearts of the vulnerable, the weak, and above all, the many varieties of other whom he has so deeply insulted. The African-American other, the Hispanic other, the female other, the Jewish and Muslim other. What is there to celebrate today about Trump's victory?
I think if we're going to celebrate anything about Trump's victory, it will be to carefully look at the strength of the institution, the American democracy, which I believe is resilient, I believe is strong, and I believe can embrace and deal with someone apparently as unprepared to be president as Donald Trump. I came across a Paul Krugman thing this morning in the New York Times where he says an ignorant, irresponsible man who takes advice from all the wrong people is in charge of the world's most important economy. And he says that the world is still fragile after the 2008 crisis, and we're now looking at a global recession. So I think that these are the kinds of things that the American democracy is going to have to try and deal with. One of the things that this election, I think, has shown us is there are 2 Americas. There's an America that believes in progress and equality and these kinds of things, and there's another America, a racist, xenophobic, misogynistic, homophobic America.
Well, indeed, I have a friend of mine, a guy called Rodney Hunt, who works in the public sector in Maryland. He's a black man, and he put up today, he was chatting to me on Facebook, and he just said, the question he put to me is, what does this really say about America? Now, you're talking about
it tells the truth about America. As a historian, one of the things that we have to look at, one of the conversations that we've never had in America is the legacy of slavery. This is a country that was built on the back of slavery. 200 years, that's a long time, followed by Jim Crow America that lasted up until 1954. There's an undercurrent of resentment. Abraham Lincoln, one of his questions was, what do we do with these people, these 4 million black people? They can't fit in this country.
Yes.
That sense of this other has been has been part of the American legacy, is part of what's led to this, you see, because one of the things that we've had to do is develop a narrative in order to justify that crime. All right? And that's a narrative that has suggested who black people are, who the other is, and so one of the things that capitalism needs is to have another to blame for the kinds of things that are affecting this income inequality, this economic anxiety. Where's that coming from?
Yes,
we can't say it's coming from policy. It has to be because we have too many immigrants. It has to be because we have too many black people who are feeding off of the
It's always the finger pointing.
Exactly.
And that's that's the root of the populism side.
And so that's all now out on the table, and that's something we're going to have to come to grips with.
Well, this is a question now that I want to put to Axel Krause here. I mean, where did Hillary go wrong? I mean, we've been in the newsroom this morning saying, can we say that Trump's victory is perhaps the 40 million millennials who are giving a fingers to the establishment, like these millennials who just basically want to react against anything. But there were also the millennials who were very much behind Bernie Sanders. So I would doubt that a lot of the Sanders people went out then to vote for Trump. But what actually happened to the Clinton campaign? What went wrong with her?
I think what went wrong with her, and first of all, you've got to understand that neither she nor Trump were very popular with Americans. Many Americans, majority of Americans, said they were simply disappointed, not in accord with, critical of the way the system was working. In other words, the whole system has been called into doubt, into question by the people that voted for Donald Trump. And they weren't just white people. The Latinos, blacks, many people, even though the American economy is on the bend. I didn't read Paul Krugman this morning, but I've been reading him for years. And he's been very anti-Trump. But here we are. We've got an economy which is improving. Unemployment is down 4.9%. That's half the rate of where unemployment is in Europe.
In Europe, indeed. Yeah.
I don't know. I think we have to be careful about judging Trump based on what he said, declared, promised, threatened, etc. during the campaign.
But what did Clinton do wrong? I mean, what didn't set the world on fire?
I think one of the reasons is she was not a female Obama. If you look at 2008 in particular, the tremendous enthusiasm that there was no great
Of course, the mobilization was incredible.
In the media, and by the way, the media is also a loser here. The media was used willingly or unwillingly, but do
you think there'll be scores to be settled now that Trump has said that basically the majority of the media was against him?
Our profession has been really hit hard by this. There's going to have to be a lot of reckoning, which has already begun, about how we cover the news. The media, all of them, the New York Times, The Economist, all the publications that a lot of us read faithfully, all were in favor of Mrs.
Clinton.
Yeah. Yep. And it was interesting that Der Spiegel, the German leading news magazine, had on its cover both Clintons, both Bill and Hillary. And that what she did wrong was maybe that she didn't let herself go.
Yeah.
That's what a lot of people think. She became and looked often very rigid
Well, she was very polished as well, but it wasn't exactly lighting the fire in everybody's hearts.
No, not the way that Obama did, or for that matter, the person that I think is for Europeans the most understandable way of looking at Trump through something else is the prime minister 3 times with a background almost identical to Trump, namely Silvio Berlusconi. Berlusconi, a businessman, rich, women, glamour, bunga parties, etc. There is a feeling that she never was able to come up even with a slogan
that would get people
like
going.
America is great, or yes we can.
Well, there was a simplistic side to that as well. Now, but the one thing I just want to put to Curtis, do you think that writers, journalists, or people of free opinion should be worried now that Trump is in power, because he has also threatened in the past to bring in legislation to curb any of the of the free speech that could have been
I think not worried is not the right word. I think this is a moment for media introspection. The reason I say that is because the media really did play a tremendous role in creating Donald Trump. The money was pouring in. The hits on the internet were tremendous. Every word, in other words, the media legitimized in the eyes of a great many American voters, Donald Trump. As far as Hillary is concerned, you have to realize that there has been an anti-Hillary machinery since she was First Lady for Governor Bill Clinton in Arkansas. She called herself Hillary Rodham, not Hillary Rodham Clinton. She criticized, at a certain point she says, what do you think, I should stay home and bake cookies? In other words, one of the characteristics of America is we are a misogynistic country. And we're not a country that is ready to embrace a powerful woman. And Hillary so exemplified that there's been this narrative. She killed Vince Foster. You name the bad, horrible things that she's done is part of a narrative that's been created over all these years, and she exacerbated it with her lies, Bosnia under attack and this sort of thing.
Well, this is an edition of The Globe that was on the shelves at this weekend. My wife was actually in the States. It's World War III Hillary Clinton if she gets into the power. So there was a lot of scaremongering out there, but I want to just go more on what could have been or what will be now to Ardavan. The Middle East is still a problem. It's a thorn in the world's side at the moment. It looks like the most unsolvable problem that is facing the future of this planet. Now, let's look at Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel congratulated Donald Trump, but also the Israeli Education Minister this morning said that the idea of a Palestinian state was over after Trump's election as president. Do we have reason to believe that any two-state solution is now finished with Trump?
In the event that we were supposed to consider that a two-solution state was ever considered as a viable option by anyone, you may effectively today pronounce this option as dead as far as the attitude of the Washington administration to come on January 20th is concerned. But you see, Trump is not only about the Middle East, and his attitude will have consequences globally. When you talk about the Middle East, you're talking about Islam. You mentioned some of his comments that shocked the Muslim world. Today, no matter how we look at it, there is a problem with Islam. And there's a problem with radical Islam in particular that which is personified by the Wahhabi version of Saudi Arabia's ideology.
Indeed, yes.
Obama will have to face the Arab world. Obama will have to face its own Muslim community in the United States, although he tried to somehow moderate his previous words on the subject. But he will have to put Islam on the agenda one way or the other. You cannot today look at Iraq in this current fight that the Americans are helping with against the Islamic State in Mosul and not consider what will be the consequences of Trump's election. I believe that it's going to change. I believe that what the Washington administration is going to try to implement is that they're going to put a lot of pressure on the Persian Gulf Arab countries, petromonarchies, for them to stop funding radical Islamic movements, and on Saudi Arabia in particular, to stop providing the ideological skeleton for all these jihadist movements.
But is it just as simple as that? I mean, surely if this wasn't such a complicated issue, it would have been solved a long time ago.
You see, the Arab world is scared today, and in particular the petromonarchies of the Persian Gulf. Let us not forget that the United States Congress, both houses, the House and the Senate, quasi-unanimously voted to override the veto of the President of the United States, Obama, first time ever in his 8-year administration, authorizing victims or alleged victims of the 9/11 tragedy to officially sue the government of Saudi Arabia. This is a huge, humongous shift in the mentality of the American politicians. This implies that they have finally understood that what's behind 9/11 is not Iran or the Shia world. It's the Saudi
Or
way
Saddam Hussein.
of looking, or Saddam Hussein, or the Taliban in Afghanistan. It's what the Saudis personify. There will be consequences in the Arab world for certain. I believe that Israel managed to obtain its favorite choice because Trump is their favorite choice. I think that Israel is going to get additional financing, and I don't believe there will be a Middle East policy coming out of D.C. under the Trump administration.
Well, I have to say, very good insights from all of you. I think we had quite a balanced little conversation here on looking into the crystal ball of the next 4 years of the Trump administration.